Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope you're having a fantastic Friday. Normally, we do our live streams on Sunday, but I had some personal stuff come up. Really, I had to take care of some daughters. They had brakes that went out, and so I changed 4 sets of brakes. So that was a big kind of
Wait, 4
time.
sets? I thought it was just 1.
Two sets, but it was 4 brakes on the whole
Oh,
car.
okay.
So today's kind of a little bit different format. So we're doing it a different time, different day, but we hope you are getting ready and pumped up for the weekend. But today, man, I'm super excited. Got a good friend of mine. FOMO is in the house.
Hey, hey,
FOMO, so glad to have you, man, as a guest.
I am happy to be here.
How you doing, man?
I've never been on your live stream, and I'm thinking one day I'm going to be so into it, I'm going to have to get on. And that one day came after to say, I'm still remembering that comment you had. I only sit 9 feet away from a 150-inch screen. I was like,
Yeah,
that's not
absolutely.
possible, right?
Yeah.
And I've been
Yeah.
thinking about it ever since. And I realized, you know what? You're onto something because
Yeah.
I'm researching my first projector, and I'm finding myself 9 feet away from a 120-inch screen.
Yeah.
And I went to the movie theater recently where I normally sit. I prefer
Sure.
sitting. I had that little kind of testing of, if I do it this way,
Right.
and it turns out, oh my
I'm just
goodness.
imagining somebody looking at
Right,
photos.
right. Like, wait, what the heck is it?
What is that guy doing?
And I'm like, wow, that 120-inch is exactly what 9 feet away from me is.
Nice.
And so I'm beginning to increase the size to viewing distance recommendation for a lot of people, because the TVs today and projectors, the resolution is so good that you're okay sitting a little close without seeing artifacts.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that people are concerned about is the viewing angle. So I definitely, at 9 foot from 150, it's definitely on the cusp of being too big. But the way I looked at it, a friend of mine, he said, look, Michael, we can always mask it down. But if you're building a screen, like I have a custom screen that we actually build, it's a DIY screen using Seymour's fabric. And once you build it, you're kind of stuck unless you want to rebuild a new one and buy new fabric. So I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Let's go as big as we can. And then if we need to make it smaller, we can always add some kind of masking, whether you use velvet or something like that, electronic masking, something like that. But I think it's going to be super, super cool. So let's say hi to some folks in the chat before we jump into it. Ivan's here. AA's here. Grayson, good to see you, brother. RGA's in the house. Michael, good to see you. What does Michael say? He says, sorry, but the subject will be painful from a true projector guy like yourself. It possibly could, man. So I think we're gonna have some
capacity. Are you painful just because of
painful that I might have to get rid of my projector is what he's saying, I think. So
yeah, we definitely have a lot to talk about for sure.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a fun conversation. One thing that I find in technology, and especially in the home theater space, stuff changes so quick. And FOMO, if you're not familiar with his channel, has an incredible channel, deals a lot with TVs. And so I thought, who better to have on the podcast than, to me, one of the best TV experts on the platform right now. Super appreciative that you could just come on and hang out with us for a little while. We're going to try to keep this to about an hour, maybe just a tad bit over, but because I respect everybody's time. But I think this is going to be a fun conversation. So before we jump into the actual topic, just give another quick plug. We are still getting ready for M-Wave, which is the Midwest AV experience. So if you guys are looking for just something totally different than what's out there in regards to like trade shows, home theater events, 2-channel events, definitely check us out. Come hang out with us. It's July the 22nd through the 24th. This year will be our first event. Me and Ryan are hosting that up in Lawrence, Kansas. And FOMO, we would love to have you join us if you're able to carve out some time.
And your timing is perfect because the New York City Valley Electronics TV shootout is July 9-10. That gives me about 2 weeks to recover, and then
there you go.
And I was telling my wife, she's like, if you want to go, just go. And you're telling me, wow, all these people are going to be there at this home. I think, we'll be in the backyard camping out, a little bit of Woodstock, right?
Ryan's like, wait, I didn't sign up for that, man.
I didn't sign up for it. But it's all good together. And actually, on your TV front, we're trying to solidify Sony and bringing all of their new stuff to the show. So hopefully,
that would be super cool.
Like I just went to a training with them a couple weeks ago, and we're hopefully, and they're pretty sure they're coming. I just haven't gotten a 100% confirmation from them, but it'd be nice for them to bring all of their new displays. They're definitely bringing the projectors if they come, but I want them to bring all their stuff.
Yeah.
Will you be able to share, or when can you share what projectors will be there? Because I think that's going to be a huge draw. Hey, what are we comparing at this shootout?
Right. So that's still a little bit up in the air. Right now, it's the LS12000 from Epson, a RS540. There's, I think, an NX5, my NZ9. The benefit with the NZ9 is I can mimic the NZ8 and the NZ7. And then if Sony comes, you're going to have the 7000, the 6000, and the 5000, and then more than likely the OG 5000, which is their 5000 lumen projector, and then I'm hoping, because it was at the training, the 380, which is their 10,000 lumen projector. So hopefully we can melt some screens when we do that.
That's just so exciting. I mean, because I'm starting to shop around, and I'm looking at the 7000 ES, the NZ9000, and I'm wondering, am I overdoing it? And the shootout kind of fits, like, what is my use case exactly?
Yeah.
So I have so many questions for you guys at that event already, because I haven't bought anything yet, but I know that the budget's going to be changing depending on what we discover, because there's so much, I don't want to call it controversy, but the Sony release, the price ranges are head to head with the NZ series, right? So many people are going to ask, so should I get the Sony 6000, 7000, or the NZ8, NZ9? Because they're like literally just so similar. And what about this Mad VR application external? Because I saw your video again. It's the second time I went through it, because now I'm understanding more. I'm thinking, Mad VR Envy is another 10 grand, and if it's 8K, Extreme's another 15 grand. Like, what does it bring to the table? But I saw what you guys did with the LS12000. Like, oh my god, I am just overwhelmed by the options and the budgets. Way more. This is way worse FOMO than the TV industry ever had, by the way. You got screens, you got Mad VR or Lumagen, you got the actual projector. I was like,
well, there's display.
What's that?
You're building your own display. Like a TV has all of that integrated into one, but when you're in a projection, you've got the projection unit, the screen, the tone mapping unit. If you're not doing it inside of the projector, you're kind of building everything that comes inside of one box inside of the TV. So you have more flexibility, but you also have the knowledge can exponentially grow. Not that it's any less or more than TVs, because I think a lot of people underestimate how complex and stuff TVs can be from a viewing perspective. So I think it's just a different beast. Just different.
Talking about FOMO, so I see a little device down to your back left. What's that going on back there, man? Is that a new toy?
It is. It is my Trinov 4-channel preamp that I will be using to kind of, I mean, it has room optimization, right? It's a slightly small room. I'm in a 9x10. I don't want the bass to overwhelm anything.
Yeah.
I'll do the little room optimization with the various speakers, and you could, since it's 4 channels, I could plug in some subwoofers and whatever, and know that I'll have balanced whatever in this room, right? Not one thing will overwhelm the other. It's got a microphone, and then this finally, I have the Pearl Listen. After watching Aaron's review, I go, okay, the mid-range, the vocals, that's exactly it. This is what I'm mixing, and really that's to focus on that, because I have various speakers, and this one just nails it. And then that's the amp that runs it over there. So I haven't connected everything yet. But, that's that. But I may just be lazy and just connect this RME preamp that has just these two, because maybe I don't need the optimization at all in this room. I'll just move it to another room, because this will be just enough, right? So just so many options. But we're all gear geeks, right? It's buy something and put it to use, I'm in.
Absolutely, man. So before we jump into the question, let me throw this up real quick. Get back over to my screen. Oh, where did you go here, bro? Here, I'll go to Starred. Reggie, appreciate the super chat, man. Super sticker. You have always been just a great supporter. Super encouragement to me, man. Appreciate you. Glad to have you here on the chat. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and jump in to today's question. which is, will micro LEDs, and really it can apply to even other TV formats, but micro LED is just really got a lot of hype right now. Will that be the death of projectors? And so let's kind of talk about where is the, like, what's happening in the micro LED. And I know FOMO, you're probably, I would think, probably the most knowledgeable. Definitely
Yeah.
I'm not the smartest guy in the room when it comes to TVs. So
I'm
kind
so
of,
excited about this topic, right? Because I think we're conflating a couple of things: the actual technology and the size itself. So what I want to do is kind of break down what your real question is, which is are large TV technologies going to displace projectors as you get to 100-inch, 120-inch, 140? Micro LED is one technology that will do that. We also have, well, let's start with OLED, right? So OLED at the kind of brightnesses we're talking about for effective HDR, we're already there. Now, micro LED can get brighter, but let's say you want to get significantly brighter than projector, get the HDR impact. Just the LG G2 this year, 97 inches, 27,000 MSRP, which means, you know, when it's really selling, it'll probably be under 24,000. This is square against the NZ9, 7,000 ES, but it's 97 inches of perfect blacks, HDR up to right now, they're almost at 1,000 nits peak brightness. After calibration, now obviously at the higher nits, you're going to lose some color volume, but still, right? It's 97 inches and it's a WOLED, but it's self-emissive. And then you have the cheaper 97-inch non-OLED TVs in Australia, just a plain old full array local dimming Hisense, $3,500. 97-inch, and it's just so popular in Australia. And so you don't even have to go OLED for 27,000, for under 5,000 in Australia. And many are saying, well, you know, the black levels of a good full array local dimming at least matches the Z9, right? I mean, that's the assumption. I haven't seen it yet. And that's this year. When is it going to be 120-inch and so forth? So what micro LED brings to the table is they tile everything. So now you can go to 200 inches, 180-inch, whatever.
You build your own custom size and aspect ratio, from my understanding, right?
And LG has the tile solution, Sony, Crystal, and Samsung. Samsung, their micro LED is already kind of tiled, built, and you're done. Whereas LG, you could still kind of build it out a little bit more. And Samsung could have that solution as well, but they're looking for home installations. The good news for projector owners is that solution is, one, you're over $80,000.
That's the
89-inch. So,
and I think somebody asked about it. They're like, "Hey, dude, what about that Samsung wall TV? You know, which is massive. It's beautiful, but man, 80,000 for the small one. I think it's 100,000."
And here's something a lot of people don't know: Samsung micro LED, and that's an LED, by the way. Technically, it's LED. It's not small enough to be micro, but still, what a lot of people don't realize is even the best micro LED right now is not going to exceed 1,200 nits, because the heat output is so insane that not that it's going to heat up your room, but rather they don't have an effective fan cooling system that is effective enough not to melt the electronics and
the inside stuff
inside, right? And so they're limited by the thermal control and all the stuff they have to heat sink it out. So if you were at CES, one reason why they have that little kind of like a velvet rope is so you don't feel the heat. You literally
I didn't even think about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, but it gets
now, and I would imagine if they want to add some kind of heat dissipation, that's going to increase the thickness of the TV, and a lot of people they want real thin TVs. You know? I mean, that's kind of the thing: bigger, smaller, thinner. So then it feels like they're going backwards if they have to make it thicker.
Yeah, but do you think the home theater crowd really cares about that? Because I mean, we're mounting projectors from our ceiling, and the screens you're putting on the wall are not necessarily the thinnest things in the world. So does that really matter? I think the biggest thing that's going to matter in comparison to TVs and projectors is acoustic transparency. Right, because I don't know of any way that you're going to be able to do that on a TV. I mean, speakers and TVs are getting better. right? They're
Sure.
not to the level of what you're going to get in home theater speakers, but that's going to be the biggest drawback. And the other thing that I think a lot of us have come into, at least the enthusiast level, have come to love, is that when we change something out, it's very easy to ship a projector. It's not going to be very easy to ship a 100-inch TV when you're trying to upgrade. So if you spend X amount of money, for all intents and purposes, you're kind of stuck with it. There's no going anywhere else, because shipping it's going to cost you a small fortune. Whereas shipping a projector, if you do decide to sell it onto a second home, isn't necessarily the hardest thing in the world. So those are two things that I look at pretty hard about making this switch, because my screen in my theater is 120 inches, so much smaller than Michael's. But I could conceivably do that 97-inch OLED. And I did think about it for a while, but what happens when I want to switch? What happens when I want to change it? And then the other question is, can I even get it in my basement? Like, can I get it down the stairs?
Right. Making those corners. Yeah.
Right. So I don't know. There's so many things that are coming up about, is it worth it? Is it not worth it? I also think as TVs get better, something that people aren't necessarily thinking about is, I think projection is going to get better.
Yeah.
As it increases, as technology becomes more readily available. I mean, look at what Sony's supposedly doing with their stuff. And one notable thing with the Sony projectors, and a lot of people are saying they're on par with the NZ series, is they're half the weight that the NZ series is. So something's going on there. I don't know if there's a technology difference or something implementation. I don't know, but half the weight. So that's something to consider too. And hopefully it doesn't get as hot, because the NZs pump out some heat.
Yeah. Mine's in another room, and partly because of that. I had to move it back because of the throw distance, because I'm right at about 16 and a half feet to be able to do a 150-inch screen diagonal. But having it outside the room, I remember my previous projector, it added a lot of heat to my room. So definitely, but kind of what FOMO was saying, I guess there's still some heat that's generated from the newer TVs as well too. So I wonder how that compares to projectors.
So I don't know about the heat on the projectors. The problem with the TV is people are demanding brightness. Now, whether or not they need it is another discussion.
Yeah.
But anytime you go brighter, you're going to have thermal inefficiencies. Heat is released, and OLED is very efficient. I have 4 in my studio, and when I do a comparison, within 30 minutes, I'm literally taking off my shirt. The fan's blowing. I've got the windows open, and I'm walking with my top off because it gets hot. And my air conditioning is blowing, but it can't keep up with all that heat because I'm doing HDR brightness tests. So they're all blasting 800 nits, whatever. And these are OLEDs. They're very efficient. And they're, if you touch it, it's only slightly warm, but the room gets hot pretty quick.
Now, would you say QD OLED is going to be more efficient because of the change in layers?
The QD OLED is actually, it runs a little bit cooler. I've been doing just, I guess they're casual behind the hand tests, right? I don't have a thermal gun or anything, but I believe that their rating is more efficient, but that also is set for game. You can game that to a certain degree. So I run it at maximum brightness to get a feel for it. And at maximum brightness, the G2 puts out a little bit more heat. Now that could be, the heatsink is more effective in pulling heat out and throwing it into the room. And that's another discussion because the G2 has a dedicated heatsink. The QD OLED that Samsung put out does not. But then I touch the actual panel, it's barely warm to the touch. So the PSU, that small little unit on the bottom, gets warm, but not as warm as the LG G2. So it does feel like the S95B for similar brightness is a little bit more efficient. It converts more energy into light and less heat loss. But I'm so impressed though. Yeah, definitely.
Gotcha.
So what? Go ahead, Michael.
I was going to say, what's your favorite format right now in TVs?
The technology, panel technology?
Yeah.
Oh, it's
what are you most excited about?
It's got to be the new QD OLED. And you guys, if you guys have seen any of us who's reviewed it, right? Even the critics' biggest criticism is they cannot get it to that final last percentage of accuracy. Just throw that out. We're just talking about this jump in performance that WOLED cannot even hope to match, which is color volume and color gamut. That changes everything because it's just a matter of years, months, where the tone mapping catches up to the actual panel technology, then you're going to start pushing that color volume higher and higher, and the brightness with the heats and everything starts going up. The fact that this first generation is so impressive is what excites me. Now, if this like G2, well, and to be fair to LG, they've just announced that they're going to get brighter by 20% next year, because they found a way to add a little lens, micro lenses to their OLED to make it brighter without adding heat. They're just converting more light into brightness. It's a race that's ongoing. What to say? I'm surprised, but I love it.
Well, the good thing is
small things are getting. I mean, putting lenses on pixels. I mean, that's crazy.
They call it micro lenses. Apparently, they're using it in cell phones, right? Smartphones right now. Slightly different version, but very similar concept, which is the light that's being output. They're going to create little micro lenses to maximize that light, focus it rather than lose it in ambient light at some layer. We don't have the exact technology, but they're calling it micro lenses. I think I'm gonna put out a video on that sometime later today. But the fact they can do it without more energy, like unlike GPU, CPU, they just pump up the wattage and suddenly it's faster. They're using passive technology to improve the efficiency. Now, the thing that not a lot of people realize is LG OLEDs, the W OLED, they've hit the limit of their color volume. They're gonna get brighter, but that means that their APL will be getting brighter, but their peak, let's say 800 nits, it's still going to be white pixels. It's not going to be colored pixels. And that's what I have to explain to a lot of people is it's going to get brighter, but unless you're watching a scoreboard that's bright white on a scoreboard at 1200 nits, which is what's going to happen, if the content demands yellows and oranges to be at 800 nits, WOLED cannot do that. But hey, they don't care. They're in the brightness wars to win it, and they're keeping up with the Joneses. So it's pretty good.
So when you think about like the topic of, projectors versus TVs, to me, the obvious reason that people go with projectors because they want a massive screen. They want something typically 100, 110, 20 on up. I mean, I just did a home theater tour. The gentleman had a 206-inch diagonal screen. Wow. Absolutely gorgeous.
Come on, FOMO, bring your TV game. Let's go.
He had a pretty high-end projector. He had oh goodness, I forget what the MSRP on it. He didn't pay anything near that, but I think it's like a $60,000 or $80,000 projector. But so when you're looking at that, it's like, okay, that's huge. But in TV world, can you even get that high? You can't, at least right now. And so to me, the thought is, okay, if I want to go bigger, can these TVs, like when will the TV get to the point to where it makes more sense for us that are looking at projectors, or those of us that have projectors, to make that switch over to the TV world? I think I see a lot of potential there, especially the fact that we've now got these panels. So, if you want to go 16:9, you can go 16:9. You just organize the panels in that fashion, is my understanding. If you want to go 2.35 to 1 or 2.4 to 1, then you just make that aspect ratio with those. And so I think that's pretty creative and interesting. Right now, I think the biggest limiting factor is price and cost, and how long will that take to come into the space to where the average guy could afford that if they saved up enough. And, are they willing to, bypass the projector route and go to a TV? So I definitely think it's kind of interesting. What are your thoughts on that?
Okay. So as you're talking, it hit me that at the 200-inch, it has to be tiles. So the number one problem with tiles is the seams.
Okay.
And the color consistency and luminance across all tiles. Because you've seen those kind of cheap commercial displays where you have different, like, wait a minute, I can see the tiles because they have slight gray here, the white point on all, whatever, 200 tiles. Let's say it's, 14 by 10 tile, whatever.
Sure.
Every one of those tiles have the exact same white point. And if any one of them have a luminance efficiency problem that's not properly matched, can you imagine the nightmare of going there by hand, matching it? Because you're going to have to do that. That's why LG requires an installer to do this because you have to match the luminance of each tile, and they have to hand calibrate each tile to match the tiles. So you're not even technically accurate to any reference. You have to be accurate to each other first. So I think the tile solution is labor intense. It's too labor intensive for the common man. I cannot imagine just any one of us going out there with our Cal man, one tile at a time. Like, no, right?
Right. Yeah.
And we're not at a point where they can self-calibrate. We can't even do a single panel self-calibration. Forget like 100 panels, right? Yeah. So it has to be a monolithic, giant. But then it goes to Ryan's point. Is that even going to fit through a door? If I don't break that tile down, and you're right, I'm thinking 97-inch, maybe just enough to fit through a typical door. Any larger, you don't want to take that off. How heavy is it? And just bend it slightly, and you're out of warranty because that's on you, right? Once they hang it up, you touch it, that's on you. And unless it's almost like I think that's why they're focusing on roll-up OLED. So now I'm beginning to think aloud why roll-up OLED is a thing.
Okay.
You could do a roll-up OLED. It doesn't get too bright, but it gets brighter than a projector. So let's say peak brightness of 600 nits, but it's roll-up, perfect blacks. Then you're limited the size of a carpet, right? You can go as long as you want because you've rolled it up. It gets maybe this thick, and you can fit it out the door. So I see that's where the roll-up OLED makes its use case. Doesn't have to be bright, just maybe double the brightness of a projector, even the best NZ9 for about under 30 grand. Now we're talking. So roll-up OLED.
I think I have to agree there that when you bring up the technology shift, that's really what I think is going to kill or put us to the point where we can possibly start ruling out projectors. When you start bringing in roll-up OLEDs, I think you're on the cusp. I don't really know how the technology works, but on the cusp of audio acoustic transparency, you're moving closer to that direction where you have a permeable surface so audio waves can get through. And that starts moving people, I think, a lot more in the direction of, okay, I'm more comfortable now replacing my screen and my projector with a roll-up OLED. Plus, it makes it more feasible for installation. I mean, the big TVs are, my mom, it's not a TV, but she's moving a piano and it's got sentimental value. So she's actually having to do, she's building a house to make construction compromises and bring the piano in first before construction's done to be able to get it in the basement. I mean, if you do big displays like that, are you going to start to have to do things like that if they're not panels? And I think a big part of the expense for micro LED and panel type displays is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's probably the consistency of the panels themselves, right? It's what you get into with CPUs and things where certain parts of a batch are thrown out because they're not usable. So probably drives the price up. And until manufacturing is brought down to a certain level, prices are just going to continue to stay high. And form factor TVs, large form factor TVs, are going to be the way to go. But then can you get them in the room? And then taking that a different direction, as technology increases, I think we're also seeing the majority of people get bigger and bigger projector screens as projectors become more and more lumen capable. So will they ever actually displace projectors? I don't know. People may just go to bigger and badder screens. That seems to be what they're doing lately.
So one thing that I think that's going to be a challenge too is the fact, so a guy like myself and even Ryan, we have acoustic transparent screens. And so we're doing an LCR. I've got it. Well, oh, that's right. Yours, never mind. Yours are out front. For some reason I thought your sender was behind your screen, but
most of guys do.
So I've got an LCR screen, or LCR behind my screen. So I've got an identical left, center, right. Is there ever going to be an acoustic transparent TV? You know what I mean? Yeah. That's gonna be a deal breaker for me, because I absolutely love having the dialogue come exactly from where it's happening on my screen. If there's, dialogue in the center, if there's something happening on the left or something happening on the right, like your brain is seeing and hearing and understanding exactly what's going on because it's happening in proximity to where you're visually seeing that. And I know when I had a 103-inch screen, which even at that, most people say, oh, 103-inch, that's a big screen. I never felt that that was immersive. I always felt like I was watching, like looking at the movie instead of being immersed into the movie and kind of like being sucked into it. And so I always had that struggle with a 103-inch screen. But then also that my first screen was not an acoustic transparent screen. So I had the center channel above it. I did have it angled down because, you know, we know our mid-range and high frequencies are very directional. So you want to make sure you aim that tweeter at your listening position, which I did. But it was just really odd hearing the sound come from here and then jumping way up here and then coming back down here. And so I think that's another consideration that, you know, those of you that are considering going to a projector, or maybe you have a projector and you're thinking, man, should I switch over? How, you know, how valuable is having sound come directly behind your screen? You know, what value does that present itself to you?
And I'd like to throw out one alternative, because I heard about this and I didn't realize they could do this, is if you have a multi-channel processor, and I'm going to use Trinov as an example because that's what application that Trinov promotes, is you could have a TV or any non-transparent screen or non-acoustically transparent screen, and you have, let's say, 3 speakers on top, 3 speakers on the bottom, then they'll matrix it into one. That's one solution, but now you're adding $25,000, $30,000 processor. But that's one way to do it. How I have it is, of course, I review TV, so I can't have it behind the TV. I use Genelex on the ground, but they have such great dispersion. I can point it up, and your mind assumes it's coming from the TV, because I tried to localize it, but is it on the ground?
So how big is your TV though?
I have 6 TVs lined up. So that's why, right? I cannot put it behind.
So that's a big TV then. Okay. So and the only reason why I asked that is because if you had even a 80-inch TV, you can have the proximity of that speaker closer to your ears than if you had a 150-inch screen. So, okay.
Well, that's why I went to projector, because I see a conversion. It's like I had an 83-inch OLED, and then I never installed it. I just sold it to one of our viewers because, like, 83 inches too small, only because if I want to get the full immersion, right, with I have a 9.2.6 and everything, I want the screen too, because you want to take up that wall, and there is no TV that will do that. But you guys can do that with a projector. So I'm dabbling into that.
We just need to do a panel wall of 83-inch TVs.
There you go.
83s.
4 of those, right? Or maybe 6 of those, like however it comes out to 16.9, right?
Yeah. I think the hard part is you're going to have that bezel, so you're going to have a line.
Your brain eventually takes the bezel out. So I did multi-monitor gaming for a while, and your brain adapts to it pretty quick where you don't even see it.
I don't want that.
Well,
I couldn't.
Yeah.
That'd be hard for me, to be honest with you.
It's a compromise. What do you guys think as TVs get bigger about difficulty of mounting?
Yeah. You're not going to take it. You can't adjust it. You might have a swivel. I bought a mantle mount that I heard from you guys on your Hi-Fi podcast, right? The mantle mount company. That thing is huge. And once you put it up, you have these giant long screws through your wall. And I'm like, I can't install that. I'd just rather put up a projector. I mean, at that point, I was like, it's actually easier to do one of those bottom-up motorized projectors at 120. The Vivid Storm, I think, does something like that, or just a fixed screen that if I move, I just roll it up, and I'm done. I don't have to worry about hurting myself. And what Classy is saying, that G2, even though it's thick, it's hard. I mean, one wrong flex, a person loses their grip.
Yeah,
you're gone.
Yeah, and that's a lot of money.
TVs may eventually get to the point though where you just put them on the ground, right? They're big enough that they cover the whole wall, so you just sit them on the ground and you don't have to mount them anymore.
So how do you get through the door? You're the door problem.
No, then it becomes you're building the house around the TV wall.
During construction, let's bring the TV in, leave it in this box.
Let's put it in. And then
that's right.
Build the house around my TV.
So kind of, again, just some things to think about. If you're mounting a TV on the bottom, that's great if you have a couch. What if you have 2 rows of seating? That makes it really, really difficult to be able to see. You'd have to have that rear seat way, way elevated to be able to see over the front row if your
That's true.
TV's pretty close to the bottom. So again, just some things, I'm not here to say that one way is better than the other. The whole concept behind providing discussions like this is to help you as the consumer figure out what would work best in my setup and in my space, in my living room, in my garage, in my master bedroom, in my dedicated theater room, because I think we all have different things that are valuable to us. Like me, I want to make sure I have an LCR. Once I went there, it's like I can't ever see myself undoing that. I think I would miss it way, way, way too much. But that's just me. And not everybody has that same desire. And so you have to kind of figure out what are your limitations. Of course, what is your budget? Because that's going to greatly determine what you're able to do. Some of you ultra short throw are perfect for your setup. They have their issues as well. Where do you place the center channel? How do you change from 2.35 to 16 by 9? You really can't, so there's definitely some challenges there. And so unfortunately, there's not a perfect solution for anybody, but with enough information, hopefully you can decide what's going to work best for you.
I think you guys brought up a great point about where do you put the speakers, because we take it for granted that we know what we're doing with speakers, ground, ceiling mount, but the typical consumer walks in, he's like, I want to run full immersive audio.
Yeah.
And Best Buy is going to say, where would you like to put your speakers? It's like, what, the TV doesn't come with speakers? Not big enough to fill the room, right? And
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good
even
question.
even Jonas says he's watching this podcast on a projector. So that's pretty awesome, man. That's phenomenal. Super cool, man. I'm just looking through some comment. If you happen to see any comments, Ryan, feel free to throw those up on there.
Most of them are just.
But we're definitely seeing a convergence of TV size as they get bigger.
Yeah.
And ultra short throw becoming very easy to install.
Yeah.
And then the high-end projectors, we'll start, let's say the Epson ELS 12,000, right? Around $5,000.
Mhm.
This is where people are shopping now on the TV side, is between $5,000 and $8,000 for these giant OLEDs.
Yeah.
Now they can actually say, wow, if I have a projector, I could get even bigger, and I have light controlled room anyway. So I was going to ask you guys that.
Yeah.
In a light controlled room where you don't
Mhm.
have to worry about the weird brightness and a weird screen to take care of that, are you guys tempted any more by going to a TV? I mean, does a light controlled room solve your HDR issues, or do you still feel like you're missing something?
The light controlled room does help quite a bit, but when you start getting into those not entry level, but entry level, high level projectors, I guess I'll call them, for the LS 12,000 and stuff.
Yeah.
When you're comparing,
that's still budget compared to what's out there.
Yeah,
Right.
It's inexpensive, but it's expensive too.
Yeah, yeah, and you're making a lot of compromises. I mean, your black levels are not, your contrast is not going to be very good in comparison to a $5,000 TV, but your pros for that and the things that you're gaining are size. So you have to, your balancing act is how much do you care about contrast and lumen output in comparison to size of the display, right? That's right now we can't have both unless we're starting to get really into the high end JVCs and Sonys and stuff. You're doing better, but even then I can't approach OLED level blacks. I think the high end JVC stuff, you're probably encroaching on plasma level, but I don't think you're to the level of OLEDs anywhere near full pixel off.
And I think we all recognize that in the projector world, and I'm okay with that because again, you got to figure out what's more important to you. Is it those ultra inky blacks, or is having great blacks, but not inky black, OLED black, but having the ability to go really big, is that more beneficial to you? And to me, that's where I found, just over my 15-year journey in this home, going from 103 inch to 150 inch, man, once you go with a huge screen, it's a cool experience. It really, really is. And, it allows you to, like I said, it just kind of sucks you and immerses you into that experience. And to me, I kind of equate that to what you're talking about with immersive format. Back in the day, we had a couple of speakers up front, and that was cool. Sounded a whole lot better than the TV speakers. But then we added a center channel. Now we got side surround. Now we got back surrounds. And now we're doing Dolby Atmos. And now we're at a point where we're immersed audibly. And once you go with a really big screen, and to me, like 100, 110, 120, 130, 150 or bigger, that's when it adds a whole new level of excitement and immersiveness visually that you simply cannot replicate with an 80 something inch TV. Now I had someone to give me an 82-inch TV. Now it's been many years ago. I had honestly, I don't even remember the model or even the brand, but it wasn't flat panel by any means. It wasn't real thin, but it wasn't that big monster TV either. It was a 3D TV. But they gave it to me. They didn't want to store it. I had bought a bunch of stuff over a period of a year, like just continue. I'm like, all right, I'll buy that. I'll save up some more money. I'll buy that, and they were just selling all of it. And so I brought that home, set it up in the living room. And now granted, I had an 82-inch in the living room and 103 in the theater room. And you think, that's not that big of a difference. It was, to me, I never had a desire to look at the 82-inch TV, and I ended up selling it pretty quickly, like within a month or two. And I'm like, like I said, it just adds a whole new level of immersiveness visually. And so I think that's where projectors have something that, at least right now, that the TVs can't offer, at least in the affordability kind of price point.
That is so true at so many levels, even within the TV world. If people, if you guys, I know that a lot of viewers are on my channel. Every time we hear this, should I go with the larger one or the smaller one? The smaller one, same price. That means the smaller one has higher quality image. But if the difference is more than, 55 to 65 is close. But if you're going 55 to 77, which is where we are now, the 55-inch QD OLED is like 2,300 or so. But then the 77-inch LGC one has been known to drop to 2,300.
Yeah,
I'd go with the 77-inch because now you're going from 55 to 77, and the difference
on Costco at 1,900 right now.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Again, 55, 65 isn't bad. I might go with a picture quality, but 77 is a huge jump in immersion. And go from 77 to 120. I recognize the awesomeness of OLED. I have so many, and yet I go to a movie theater. What are the black levels when watching Avengers at a movie theater? Like, I don't even know there are black levels. They're just watching.
I'm just like, this thing's massive.
Like, I don't care, right? Yeah. And I think that's something that I have to remind myself is the pixel peeping part of us geeks. We are so driven into the accuracy, the individual brightness of the pixels. But then when you put it all together, it's that classic, the sum of the parts into 120, 140 inch.
Yeah.
It's so intangible. So that's why I'm looking at projectors.
When you're comparing a 55-inch QD OLED to a 77-inch OLED, what I saw when I was at the Sony training, when you're far enough away from your main seating position, it can be difficult to even tell the difference, right? If you're really staring at something and you've got a still image and there's no movement, the scene isn't changing, you can probably say the QD OLED looks brighter, but in a image in motion with the scene changing and movement, it is very difficult to tell unless, like you said, FOMO, you're going up and pixel peeping and actually looking for that stuff. So I think it comes down to what people value and what they want, and and this is the question that I pose to all of my clients is, what is good enough? Like, where are you comfortable with saying, this is good enough, there's better stuff out there, I don't need to go chasing the rabbit down the rabbit hole, I'm fine and comfortable here. And to me, and I echo what you just said, I would rather have a bigger OLED than a smaller QD OLED because it's good enough.
And the one point that you brought up that I should have also mentioned during all my QD OLED and OLED reviews. I know I only mentioned it once, but I should throughout these reviews is your content source really is the limiting part, not the TVs. If your content is Rec 709, barely HDR, the OLED and the QD OLED identical because both of them could render 400 nits easily In Rec 709, it's not putting out these wide color gamuts. And even when they do, it's always in this strange green that you're not going to care if you're missing this extra green that's there or not. And so easily 99% of all content out there is Rec 709, HDR graded under 600 nits that the LG C2 and G2 would easily hit.
Mhm.
When you put a QD OLED, a lot of people are saying, I don't see the difference. I go, exactly. Pixel peepers like me, we pull out the hard content. We put in the spears and muscle, 10,000 nit. Let's push it and let's see what it can do, right?
Give it
And
that torture test.
right, the torture test with real content, but it's torture content. And I speak personally with Stacy Spears. You know, Stacy, you got to do this and this because I need to see what these panels are capable of. But we're talking about the future where the creators are so far behind. They're still just touching into DCI P3. They've only recently got away from Rec 709, and they don't want to even touch HDR above 800 nits because they know how many people have TVs that's even capable of tone mapping that properly. They know it's going to look terrible or it'll look too dark because now it's graded too dim and you need a certain level TV to raise everything up properly. So a lot of color graders like, I'm not going to make my stuff look crappy because it's going to be too dark in HDR.
3D Blu-ray Bunker has a cool thought here. He says, major advantage of a projector. It encourages a very black and dark room for full concentration on the movie. A giant TV would encourage using brighter rooms, which is far from the cinematic experiences. That's kind of interesting because people are going to want to put these in their living rooms. And can you get a living room really, really dark? And that is difficult, especially when you've got ambient light. Even with shades, sometimes it's difficult to get a room really, really dark. So again, it comes back to where are you using this, you know?
Yeah, but what happens when you put a TV of that caliber into a pitch black room? You know, what
I don't
happens
know.
when you do that? I mean, you do bring up a good point that a TV like that, you're typically projectors are in much darker rooms and TVs aren't typically there. But what happens when they are, right?
Yeah, true.
That's the question that I pose to people, and I've seen repeatedly in comments, and I'm going to play devil's advocate now.
Yeah, do it, man.
People are saying, well, my TVs, and I realize this is kind of against what I said earlier, that my display is good enough. I'm on a huge screen. I don't care about the blacks. I don't care about X, Y, or Z. What happens when you see a display that's able to do those things? What happens does that ruin it for you? I mean, are you going to be constantly going back to your display and going, man, this sucks, and I thought it was awesome, because you've now been ruined by this other display that's capable of it? So if you do think that, I'm just putting a caution out there, because it has happened to me, right? Like when I saw the 380 from Sony on a 192-inch screen, 192-inch screen, and it was at 80% brightness. It was so bright, I couldn't look at it.
Yeah.
And it was unreal. And the screen was the size of a wall, right? But the black levels, I think, were a little off because it was so bright.
Yeah,
but
I think there's a trade-off there a lot of times. The brighter you get, the less contrast you've got, lower black levels.
There's a reason why that projector is so expensive. It still does pretty well in the contrast department.
Nice.
But it's ruined me quite a few times in certain aspects of, I'll say, this is good enough. Like the story that I say a lot with my subs. I went over to Arkea's house, and I talk about him all the time. I had a pair of Rel 212 SEs. I'm like, these subs are awesome. And I go over to Jonathan's house, Arkea's house, and I leave.
You're like, dadgummit, why did I even come here?
Something else, because I've been ruined. Like it ruined me. I couldn't go back home and think these are amazing, because I found out that there was something else better for not that much more, if any more money. And even when it is, I'm now imagining what my setup would be like on in that regard. So I just caution people, when you have that mindset, don't ruin it for yourself and walk into a room. If you are like me and are going to be constantly thinking about that room in the future.
Yeah. So Crystal, how do you say that? Somebody pronounce that.
I'm just going to call him plays.
Critical.
Critical. There we go. All right, cool. So GTZ 380 has very good blacks. It's deeper blacks than a 790, for example. If rightly calibrated, it's in game pretty much.
That's true, but you're sacrificing, if I remember correctly, a lot of the lumen output to get down back to that contrast. Because I mean, look at Christie's. Christie's are super bright, but they're not going to have amazing blacks like if you would see at a lower lumen output projector. I mean, it has great when you're not running at max lumen output, but you're not going to get those inky blacks when you're at 10,000
Can
lumens.
I ask you guys a question? Because I think that's something that I'm hearing as a debate all the time. And I think this applies to TV guys as well, is for immersion or just for the wow factor, which is more important for you, the black levels where you see all shadow detail, including the deepest black, or the peak brightness where the impact contrast between the brightest area, not necessarily black, but not contrast to near black. Where are you going, or which would you err on? Because I see a lot of projectors, well, the strength is in the darks and the grays, but it doesn't get super bright,
right?
Or super bright, but then they slightly lift the blacks. Where you guys?
The January shootout was pretty telling about that.
Yeah,
where a lot of the projectors were very capable of bright colors, but what set them apart was the black levels. And even in the bright scenes, the contrast that you gain from the ability of the projector to get deep and get dark is what people end up chasing. But again, that's when the money in the checkbook has to come out, because as you chase those deeper and deeper blacks with the lumen output, you're getting into things like the NZ9 or the RS4100, and it just starts to increase exponentially. But I value the blacks. I still run my RS4100 really, really bright. I think I'm at 150 nits, but it can get dark. So I went from a NX7 to the God-fearing LG that everybody loves.
That thing was doo-doo. It was straight up doo-doo, man.
I still remember Tony trying to come in and be like, I can fix this. Hour and a half later, I give up. I can't fix this.
Big shout out to Tony. This is Salk, man, SOWK. They tried. They honestly tried. They're like,
they knew what they were doing, but the hardware.
And Nick's like, no, we got this. And at the end, I was like, guys, you cannot polish that turd. No. It's bad. It's bad.
What I'm saying is that those projectors, like the LG, the Optima that we saw at the shootout, the Epson does okay at black levels, but they all do really well at brights. But what sets them apart from JVCs, and this is what you heard at the projector shootout, you'd be like, man, these projectors look so similar. And then a dark scene would come on and be like, oh no, I can't do it anymore. Because the one with contrast just blew the other one away. So yeah, taking things in a very one-dimensional way of looking at things is entirely possible of just bright scenes, but that's not all of content. So when you get down to something like an IT basement, I realize that bright scenes are more, there's more of them, but I would rather have the ability of my projector to have the darks than just be able to do the brights and have a brighter.
How much of the screen gain gives you back those blacks? Because I'm at the point where some people are saying, well, maybe if you change the gain of the screen, you might get more blacks, but then it limits the light. Where are you guys with screen selection, assuming black dark room? What is the screen gain that gives you the best black against good highlights?
I'm pretty sure. I think mine's neutral. Basically, there's no gain on it, and that's a Seymour Center Stage XD. Some guys, I mean, to me, the only time you'd really need to do a positive gain, I think, is if you're trying to do this like in a living room, or you got some ambient light and you're just trying to compensate for that. I would rather just kind of keep it as normal as possible, and then just let the projector, perform as best as it can, especially for those blacks. And even just looking at the comments, most of the guys are saying, blacks for sure. I like Ryan's thought here. He says the eye can adjust to brightness better. Once you get to a certain level of brightness, it's enough. So you have to go the other direction to better blacks. And that's why most people go to blacks. Pretty interesting thought there.
That's an interesting thought. And we saw that in January at the shootout.
Yeah.
Time and time again. On the screen gain, I think the screen gains are more to compensate for your room. Like the efficiencies of your room, you're going to use screen attributes to be able to overcome that, whether it be ambient light rejecting, increases in gain, decreases in gain, gray screens, all of that different stuff is just compensation to try and make for a better picture given your room's liabilities and limited attributes. But ideally, I think you'd want to be at one white is where you'd want to be for a most neutral picture for both best blacks and best brights.
All right.
Super cool, man. So are there any other thoughts, comments in the comments over here?
I don't.
Well, I have
don't-
a thought for you
infection
guys,
to 'em.
Yeah, go ahead, shoot
because
it.
we're all assuming that 97-inch TVs, and I think 97-inch is entering the world of projector. Not too far, but into
Mhm.
that point. I see them going to $2,500 in the near future. The question is, does that destroy the entry-level projectors? And because I see almost as high-end projectors, high-end. You're not going to replace that.
Sure.
Mhm.
What about the low, mid-end when you have, let's say, 100-inch, for the sake of discussion, 100-inch TVs that are 2,500 or less? And I see
Right.
that coming sooner rather than later because the Chinese are very good at volume, making a TV that's just good enough, price just good enough. A TCL, like this year, the TCL 97, 98 inch is like $8,000, $6,000, but
Mhm.
it'll be 5, 4,
Yeah.
3, anywhere down to 2,500. Where does that drive the projector world?
I think the key is going to be the size that you're wanting to achieve. If you're looking at 100-inch, I don't see why you wouldn't go with a TV if it outperforms it in black levels, if it outperforms it in, nits, as far as the brightness there. Um, to me, where the projector, like where would I switch from TV to projectors if I want to go large, even, and I say large, I mean 97-inch. I mean, my goodness, that's massive, especially for a living room. But if you're looking for a theater room, I'm still on the side of, I would still go even with a lower end, maybe say a Epson entry level projector.
Yeah.
Because they'll run you about $3,000 roughly. So
Well, speaking of $3,000, Classy just put up, hey, FOMO, the 98-inch RC is 3,000 right now. I'm like,
Yeah.
nice.
I think it's going to kill low end projectors. I mean, you're replacing ultra short throws effectively, which is what ultra short throws are doing.
That is true. That's what they're trying to do. Yeah.
I don't know how much bigger you can get because we talked about this repeatedly earlier. You run into size limitations, fitting through doorways, and I mean, look at refrigerators. They build bigger refrigerators, but you can't get them in the house. They don't fit through doorways. So you could have more refrigeration in your house, but at some point, we're going to reach a size limitation, and that's either going to become overcome by panels or through projector. So I think 100-inch is probably the sweet spot. But now that I'm thinking about it, I've got those 100-inch Elite screens in my basement.
Yeah.
And they weren't too difficult to move. I mean, not the weight, but the size of them, they weren't awful. So I could fit them up and down my staircase going up and down to my basement, and they fit easily through a doorway. So maybe we do have more leeway than I think we do. But
With
then you're talking
100-inch
about weight. Then you're talking about how you mount, which somebody was talking about with handles needing to come on this stuff. They need to come on it even now at 77s and 83s because it's getting ridiculous. I mean, being able to grip that and put it on a mount is very, very hard. So I think in the near future, in the next couple of years, as prices start to come down, they're just going to be more and more prevalent. Because something else I don't think we've considered is TVs are 100% easier to configure than a projector. You just put it on a wall and you're done. I mean, you could
calibrate it,
but you don't need to mess with aligning the lens, putting the projector up, making sure it's in the right spot for the throw distance, having
running your HDMI cable.
You're just hanging it and you're done. That's it. So I think that's something that definitely does need to be considered. Because people, as I've been in the AV industry, man, people really care about what's easy. You overcomplicate something and they're going to turn away from it and be like, that's too difficult. I want to do something else.
Well, prime example. I mean, a lot of people go to sound bars for that very reason. It's like, man, I mean, I want this kind of immersive sound, but man, I really don't want to throw 11 speakers around my room, 2 subwoofers, run an HDMI cable, So they're like, all right, simple, it's good enough kind of thing, So, and again, kind of the thought that I have is it still goes back to what's your budget, what's your application, and what's going to work best for you. There's a ton of different options out there. And, the best thing to do is just continue to do that research. Definitely subscribe to FOMO's channel if you love TVs. I mean, he's going to give you the latest, greatest. Dude, I want y'all to realize he did a live stream earlier today, right?
Not yet.
Okay, so you got one today.
Yours, but I will be doing one.
Okay, so he's going to be doing one today. He's doing this one, and then you even mentioned, yeah, I got a TV. I'm probably going to be putting that out this, today. This dude is a hustler, man. He will make sure you have the latest, greatest information. So definitely, if you're not a subscriber of his channel, go over, Stop the FOMO, subscribe. He's the man. Cool. Well, guys, we're right at an hour. We've had some great discussion. Any other thoughts before we kind of wrap up?
I think you guys are awesome because this is way more complicated than TV reviews, by the way. I only recently discovered external tone mapping. Like,
that's an entire another rabbit hole.
Yeah.
What? That's a thing? What is up with that? TVs are graded on their own internal tone mapping, right? Sony with the best and so forth. But that's it. You don't even think about bringing in anything external, and you guys have to deal with that. I was like, wow, this is a rabbit hole. I mean,
well, you could bring in external tone mapping on a TV.
Was that?
No reason. You could bring in external tone mapping on a TV. I mean, there's no reason.
No one does it. Because I started a shootout. Look what I did with the Epson with the tone mapper. It's a whole different TV, right?
Well, it's because its tone mapping sucked. I mean, I don't. That was why. I don't know. I think a big reason why you don't see things like the Envy on a TV is because most people aren't spending $5, $6, $7, $15, $25, $30,000 and up on a TV. I mean, you got to realize that you got to have the money flow or the cash flow to be able to throw around to make that something that possible. True. Now, you could take the free version of Mad VR on a home theater PC and absolutely do it. But I think most of the people that are hardcore enthusiasts in home theater aren't yet on the TV side for their home theaters. Maybe that's why. But I think it's coming. It's definitely coming. We see him because I work for Mad VR. We see him on the walls all the time for your Planars or Samsung the walls or LGs. And granted, those are more getting into your projectors. But as TVs get bigger, I think we're going to see more and more of them. Unless DTM is able to keep up from these manufacturers, but I don't think it's ever going to be on the level of the Envy or Mad VR, at least not here anytime soon.
Very cool. Well, FOMO, thanks so much, brother, for joining us on the live stream. This has been a blast, man. Definitely. I know when I have questions, that's the gentleman that I'm going to be hitting up going, all right, FOMO, because I don't even have a TV in the living room. Like we don't have one in the bedroom. Our kids have them, but they're just like budget ones. So I've never experienced really OLED and QLED and all this other stuff. And so I'm like, all right, I know if we ever do add one in the living room, I'll be doing all kinds of research on your channel and hitting you up personally. So we'd love for you guys to join us for M-Wave 2022 coming July 22nd through the 24th. You can get all the information, registration, whole bunch of information over at MidwestAVExperience.com. Hopefully we can get FOMO there. That'd be awesome to have him to connect with and meet you guys personally. Well, guys, we're going to wrap up. Ryan, thanks for joining us. FOMO, pleasure.
Anytime.
And guys, we'll catch you guys in the next broadcast. I will be gone for about a week, so we'll probably won't have a live stream unless Ryan ends up doing it on his own, which is totally cool. But we can announce that on the channel. But y'all have a great week, man.
I'll see you guys later.
All right.